For the last few weeks and months, I've been working a little bit on and off on the Orion R545 chassis. And the thing has been resisting all my attempts at repairing it. Every possible kind of fault that could be possible in a chassis has been thrown at me. Okay, so wire break, shorts, parts that blew up, mechanical faults, you name it. And well, partly because it has been resisting all my attempts to repair it, I sort of ignored it, and it lay somewhere on a shelf for the last few months. And well, recently I thought that, I really don't like a project which is only half finished. So I thought, well, okay, let's try to bring it back to at least some kind of working order, and let's just give it another go. Okay, so this is a recording of that renewed attempt at bringing back to life the Orion R545A chassis. Now, I just finished replacing all the wiring that runs to the speaker assembly. Okay, so you can see for yourselves the speaker has an output transformer mounted to it with a few parts, and the wiring was extremely bad. Okay, so it was that typical kind of wiring you find in old radios with a plastic that crumbles and a wire that breaks in several spots, and you name it. Very frustrating, and also the speaker was hardwired to the radio, which made it doubly hard for me to work on it. So I decided to bite the bullet, and I replaced all the wiring with some modern wiring, adding a few contacts, so that I can attach and release the speaker wires at will, which makes work on this radio chassis a little bit easier. I'm testing the audio output of the radio of the Orion's chassis. And as you can tell, when I inject an audio signal into the potentiometer, so basically I'm injecting a signal right here. Okay, so I'm injecting a signal, actually no, I'm injecting it right here at the wiper of the volume. Excuse me. So I'm injecting it right here, and you can tell that it's loud, and I mean really, really loud. Okay, so listen to this. Okay, I turn it down now, so the amplifier section of the Orion chassis works perfectly. So I'm really happy with that. Now, I switched on the AM section of the radio, and I tried to make it work, but I really don't get any sort of noise. I mean, when I inject high frequency into the IF sections, so either there are two IF sections, okay, in the Orion's chassis. So either I inject a signal here, or I inject a signal here, which, by the way, the IF frequency is 450 kilocycles or 450 kilohertz, okay, so not 455 like most radios, but 450. When I inject a signal either here or here, I don't hear a thing. I hear nothing, absolutely nothing. The radio is, well, for all intents and purposes, dead. Now, you remember we tested the local oscillator, and that seems to work, although not very well. The frequency is off, definitely. However, even with the local oscillator not working perfectly, if I inject a strong enough high frequency signal, I should hear something, and I really don't hear anything, and I mean not anything. So there are a number of possibilities. Either these two tubes, the two EBF-80s, are broken, are not performing anymore. That's one possibility. Although I seem to remember I tested them in my tube tester and they seem to work all right, and they had no shorts. Or, and that would be a lot worse, there is a break in the IF transformer, either this one or that one, or if I'm really unlucky, in both. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to concentrate on the IF transformer closest to the preamp stage that goes to the amplifier, okay? So the detector and preamp stage and the previous IF. So in effect, I'm going to concentrate on this IF transformer. If I manage somehow to get noise out of the radio by injecting signals into this IF transformer, and I mean at the right frequency, then we'll know at least that this tube and this IF transformer work well, if not correctly, at least they work. So that all I need to do really is to align the transformer and or replace the capacitors you see here, which are 160 picofarad, and at least we'll get that stage to work. We know the amp tube works, which is an EL84 pentode. Okay, so we know that works, and we know the rectifier tube works, so that's great. So the only thing we need to concentrate on right now is this section here, which is the second IF section and detection part of the radio. Okay? I do remember something, you know, as I'm working on the chassis, on the Orion's chassis, I remember, or I should say I remembered, that in one of the first episodes, while I was restoring the Orion, I found a few modifications, small modifications in the chassis, and I seem to remember that I postulated the idea that during the Cold War, when there was the Iron Curtain between the Eastern European countries and the West European countries, somebody must have run out of parts to maintain the radio and have rewired it to work with another tube or with slightly different parts. And that could possibly explain why I'm having a bit of trouble to make the local oscillator work correctly. So maybe the high frequency part of the radio not functioning correctly under the circumstances would be completely normal, since somebody probably modified it just a bit more or misaligned it to make it work with other parts. So I'm in for a rather annoying job, which is with the very simple schematic I have and nothing else, but the little experience and logical thinking. I need to find out what was modified on this radio and then modify it back so that it functions as it is supposed to function. Oh dear. Well, okay, here it goes. I am not getting any kind of signal out of the Orion, and I'm pumping in a high frequency 450 kilohertz signal into the first IF. So the IF right here. So, and I'm actually pumping in the signal here, exactly at that point, between the 20K and the 160 picofarad capacitor. I'm not getting anything out of the radio, well, out of the Orion. However, when I use an old trick used by some guys in the radio restoration community, by using a modern little AM radio, which I tuned to somewhere on the AM band where there's no station. Look what happens when I approach it to the cable which injects the IF alignment signal. So I am injecting a signal into the IF can, and a rather strong one at that. And yet I'm still not getting any sort of reaction out of the Orion's chassis. So something is well, something is very wrong here. I think I may have found the first fault in the high frequency circuitry of the Orion's chassis. And if you look at the IF coil, which I'm showing right here, well, the lower coil measures fine. I ohmed it out right now, and it measured okay, so it wasn't open. But when I tried to measure the upper coil, this one, look what I found. Indeed, one of the wires had broken off. Now, it's supposed to connect right up to the contact right here at this side of this little capacitor, this tube capacitor of 160 picofarads, or so the schematic says. And it is supposed to be connected to the contact right here. I don't know if the image is sharp. Let me check. Yeah, I think it is. So I need to connect up this wire here back up to this contact here. Now you can imagine that connecting this contact up again is going to be quite a nerve-wracking chore, because the wire is so fragile, so thin, that well, it's going to pose quite a problem to connect it back up to this contact right here. So I'm not going to film this because I need both my hands, obviously, to work on this. And well, okay, I'll pick up filming again once I'm done connecting up the wire. Then we'll ohm it out together, and I hope that when I inject a high frequency signal into the IF coil, this time I will get some signal. Right, I soldered a tiny little wire, which is, I think, 36 gauge or something like that, or maybe a bit more, maybe 28 gauge wire wrapping wire, a tiny little piece that I managed to solder to both ends, so to the wire which comes from the high frequency coil to the pin where the red crocodile lead is attached to. And well, there you go. The coil itself was still good. 74.4 ohms is its value. So that's great. I managed to restore at least that little bit. Now I need to check out how the radio will function when I'll pump some high frequency into it. Well, I finally managed on the AM band to get a very strong IF signal out of the radio. I'm at high attenuation, because if I push up or diminish rather the attenuation, the signal becomes quite strong, the audio signal. So and yeah, we're at 450 kilohertz. I don't know if you can see it, but let's see. I think you can just about see it. Yeah, so the high frequency generator is at 450 kilohertz exactly, and I'm at medium attenuation. Okay, so if I push it all the way up, or rather if I take away all the attenuation, yeah, I'm overdriving the speaker. So like I said, the IF signal is extremely strong. I found another culprit that might be causing me a bit of trouble in the radio, and that's the variable capacitor. One of the gangs, and I think it's this gang here, shorts with ground when I turn it to a certain position. So I think what I better do is unmount the variable capacitor and have a closer look at it, and possibly even clean it. That might improve the overall working of the radio. Alright, the variable capacitor, the tuning capacitor, is loose, as you can tell. I had to release 3 screws from the top of the chassis, one below that piece of red plastic you see here, over there. Let me give you some extra light. Yeah, right there. And then there are 2 screws at the front of the chassis, and I had to release those as well. So you see a tiny little hole there, right there. That's where one of the screw was, and the other screw is below this axle here, or was at least, almost below this axle here. Now I'm still hampered by the tuning axle, which is here, and I need to unmount it, and the only way I think I can release it is by first releasing this clip washer, which you see here on top of the axle. So obviously I already took off the button, so now I'm going to release this clip here, and then hopefully once I do that I can totally dismantle the axle. And here they are, the parts that I needed to release, and here it is, the tuning capacitor. So I'm actually happy I managed to release it from the chassis, because it does need a little bit of cleaning and re-oiling and everything. The axle quite apparently has had a heavy life, and well, the whole thing does need a bit of cleaning. Okay, so I'm glad I managed to release it. Now at least I'll be able to check where the short is in the tuning cap, which causes the tuning circuitry to go completely bonkers. Okay, so whenever the tuning cap shorts with ground, the tuning goes completely haywire. I haven't heard any radio station as yet from the radio, but what I did manage to measure was that every time the tuning capacitor was in a particular position, the local oscillator just stopped working. And well, like I said, it's most probably a short somewhere between the moving part of the capacitor and the fixed part, which is connected to ground. So yeah, well, I've got my work cut out. This, by the way, is the spot in the chassis where the tuning cap was mounted. Yeah, and there's the hole through which the axle goes. There's actually not much to it to release it, so 3 wires need to be unsoldered. So this wire here, and then these 2, and then 3 screws and the axle itself need to be released, and that's it. You would think there's absolutely nothing wrong with this tuning capacitor, and indeed at first glance, the capacitor looks actually pretty good. I cleaned it off already a bit, but not completely. But take a look at this. You see, hang on, I'll take my pointer here. So look at this part here. You see how this blade is bent? Yeah? And yet, when the meter is on continuity tester, okay? Yeah, when I turn the capacitor, it doesn't give any signal. No audible signal. So, despite the obvious damage to one of the capacitor's blades, this one here, it seems to work fine. Now listen to this. Oh yeah. Okay, and here it stops. So here there is no continuity. And then when I go all the way to the end, there's yet again a short circuit. So yes, this tuning gang, and it's the one I said I suspected, does have a short, or maybe even multiple shorts. So now comes the unenviable task of trying to figure out where the short is situated, and then I should try to do something about it. But since this is a tuning capacitor and it's already a bit beaten up, I should be really careful how I go about it, because if I damage these blades, then we're in even deeper trouble. Well, I finally managed to get music out of the radio. The quality of the sound is still not very good. There's a lot of noise on the sound, but I think that the quality of the sound also has to do with the fact that the tuning capacitor is temporarily connected up to the chassis via crocodile leads. Now these induce a capacitance of their own, and probably even a reactance of their own, and well, as everybody knows, long wires also pick up all sorts of noise, ambient noise. So yeah, the quality of the sound isn't very good, but at least it shows me that I did something right, and I did manage to at least repair the AM part of the chassis. That's a German station. Yeah, that's the German station. I'm trying to pick up several stations to see how well the radio works. That's an Irish radio station. By the way, I did manage to repair or, well, clean and make the tuning capacitor work better. That's a British radio station. Unfortunately for me, I can only receive AM stations, at night. So I always have to wait till 9 or 10 p.m. to test radios, well, AM radios anyway. It also picks up a lot of noise from the surrounding, which is unfortunate, but it's also not very sensitive. But again, the sensitivity might improve once I build the tuning capacitor back into the chassis. Well, that's it. That's the end of the band. Well, like I said, there aren't many radio stations on AM where I live, but I see it as a victory of sorts that I made the chassis work finally on the AM band. Now there is another problem. The AM band works more or less, not perfectly yet, but I have to make the other bands work. And by that I mean there is on the chassis a long wave band section and a shortwave section. And until now I haven't succeeded in making those two work. So what I'm going to concentrate on now is to try to get the AM to work as well as I can. And once I get that working, then I will start to concentrate on the long wave and the short wave bands. I don't know why, but for some peculiar reason, the local oscillator doesn't seem to want to run in these other two bands. So I suspect there is probably a bad contact in the switches, in the band switches you see over there. In any case, this is a victory, although not a complete one yet. So on with it, and let's hope for the next episode I'll have the other two bands working as well.